I thought that I was going to be the change that I wanted to see in this world. Do I regret becoming a social worker? I'm gonna try not to like fly off the rails with this one. Quite a few of you, maybe all of you, have seen a video that was posted back in the beginning of 2021 when my channel was very fresh and new and I was a senior in college getting my bachelor's of social work. And that video was the what I wish I knew before I majored in social work. It has like 24,000 views now as of filming this. It definitely has been a widely seen video, and so I kind of wanted to do a revamp of that now that I have my BSW under my belt, I have my master's degree under my belt, and I have over a year of postgrad work actually being a social worker under my belt. I have my associate license now, so I've made some progress in the field since I filmed that video, and so I wanted to do a what I wish I knew before becoming a social worker now that I am a social worker. Just for like right off the bat to get it over with, do I regret becoming a social worker? For some reason that's like everyone's #1 question. No, I don't. We'll definitely have some nuanced talk in this video, but overall I do not regret becoming a social worker. I'm still glad that I got that bachelor's, got that master's, got that license, and am working where I am now. If you've only ever seen that previous video of mine and now you're here, hello, I'm Anna, and I have this YouTube channel where I have documented the entire journey along the way, including all of my grad school, my first job, my field placement, changing jobs, getting my license. So if social work is something that interests you at all, hello, you've come to the right place. The first point that I talked about in the what I wish I knew before I majored in social work was that not everyone is going to understand what you are studying.
So often whenever I tell people I'm a social work major, they're like, oh, do you want to work with foster care? I don't know, they just don't really understand what it is.
Something that I wish I knew before entering the field as a social worker is that that really does not change all too much. Many people do not know what social work is, where social workers can work, the value of social work, what your day-to-day tasks will look like outside of the child welfare sector. Honestly, social work is such a fast-growing and expanding field that is nibbling its way into so many different like niches in our world. It's such a broad field where you can work in so many different areas. And I think that is part of why people don't understand what social workers are or like where they can work, because honestly the answer is social workers can work almost anywhere doing so many different things. So don't let your creativity of where you can work be dampened by people who don't understand the field or the opportunity and value that comes in being trained as a social worker, because this kept happening to me when I was majoring in it in school, and then it continues to happen to me in my career now, where social workers are known for child welfare, taking people's kids, sometimes foster care. That's where social work is known. And social workers do work there, and that is a very valuable place to work. And also, majority of social workers don't work in child welfare. So I think the difficulty to describe social work, social workers, and where social workers can work in this world partly shows the strength of the profession, in that the skills you learn and the background you have is so flexible and so multifaceted that like honestly with my current job now, there truly is not a one sentence answer I can give someone whenever it's like, oh, what do you actually do? Like, why are you there? There's not a one sentence answer that I can give someone that fully encompasses everything that I do in a day. Though I try, maybe eventually I'll come up with just like a perfect one sentence, but I always feel like whenever I explain my job to someone, either I'm talking for 30 minutes or I leave out parts of what I do. With the field growing and changing so quickly, there also is strength in coming in being a baby social worker fresh out of grad school, because you may have a more broad, up-to-date grasp on like what the field is currently than people who graduated with their social work degrees decades ago. Now, there's also strength in having decades worth of experience in social work, but the field has changed and has changed so quickly, and the opportunity has grown. And there's definitely strength in learning social work as it is today versus as it was decades ago. However, a downside of people who are outside of social work not understanding the field and social workers as a whole is honestly that it can be exhausting having to explain yourself over and over again. This is something that I definitely wish I knew before getting into the career. It would not have changed my decision, but it just wasn't something I was prepared for, was having to explain myself, my role, my value, and like why I'm present so often. Or even just like conversations when you're getting to know people and they're like, oh, what do you do? And you tell them what you do, and then they're like, oh, what does that mean? And then you have your spiel that you go through, instead of, I feel like if people say, oh, I'm an accountant, like people know kind of what an accountant is. But like for me, if I say like, oh, I'm a social worker at the children's hospital, it's like, oh, what do they do there? And it can be out of total interest and like genuine curiosity, but it just like happens to me a lot to where it can be a little bit exhausting explaining yourself in your role a lot. Also, to be fair, that like what I wish I knew, it's exhausting, is coming from someone who has made it their personal mission to educate on the field of social work. I think I also do it a lot more sometimes, but it is just a weird feeling that not every profession has, in the sense of like the general public does not understand who I am. We're not like other jobs. Now, talking about how hard it can be to put social work into words and to articulate roles as a social worker can be something that can really be a struggle whenever someone is applying to grad school, applying to get their Master of Social Work program. And maybe it's something you're nervous about as you're preparing to apply for yours. So I'm so thrilled to talk about and let you know about the sponsor of today's video, which is MSW Helper. MSW Helper is the only personal statement editing service that is made by social workers for social workers, specified to MSW applications. Their team of MSW graduates understands the nuances of the social work profession and know what MSW admission committees are looking for. Through their personal statement editing services, they'll help you integrate the experience, knowledge, and goals that you have in a cohesive personal statement that shows MSW programs just how valuable you are. They'll guide you to dissect any unclear writing you may have, lead you to utilize social work lingo, and overall polish your writing for a standout personal statement. The personal statement is the most important part of an MSW application, and there are people who would make amazing social workers who get rejected from MSW programs simply because they didn't know how to market themselves in a personal statement. As someone who has gotten one of these letters, it is not a good feeling to open a little piece of mail and see the "regret to inform you that" followed by a rejection from a program you were excited about. Utilizing services like MSW Helper allows you to tap into the knowledge of people who not only have gone through the process themselves, but have now made it their goal to empower others to get into the MSW programs that they're applying for and are excited for, and can help shape them be really great social workers. MSW Helper is on a mission to teach future social workers how to show admissions committees just how great of a social worker you'll be. Your writing ability should not impact your opportunity to get a great social work education. Since MSW Helper's #1 goal is to help you feel confident in your MSW application, they also offer free resources on their website, including webinars, personal statement templates, and blog posts that are really valuable knowledge as you're applying for your MSW program. So make sure to go browse their website via the link down in my description so you can tap into the knowledge of really cool social workers who have made it their mission to use their knowledge to help others become social workers. So thank you, MSW Helper, for sponsoring this portion of the video. The next point I made in my "what I wish I knew before I majored in social work," I actually disagree with now.
Social work is not a difficult major academically, but that doesn't mean that it's an easy major to complete.
I take this back. Part of that may come from the fact that I have a master's degree under my belt now too, so I do have the step higher level of education than I had when I was making the previous video with my bachelor's. But social work programs can be very challenging academically. I think why I felt this way during my BSW is that during your bachelor's or the generalist year of your master's, because those are the same content, you learn the background of social work, you learn the areas of the field that you can work in, and you learn lots and lots of soft skills. Soft skills take a lot of practice before mastering them that doesn't necessarily feel academic. So learning how to be a good listener, learning how to make people feel comfortable, learning how to build a therapeutic relationship with somebody. You can't necessarily take a written test to learn those and master those, so it feels different. But there is a big distinction between being good at them and bad at them. However, once you make your way into the specialist year of your MSW, whether that be the second year if you're getting your MSW or if it's your advanced standing MSW, you will find that you dig deep into the academia of social work as well. So I hadn't reached that point yet whenever I made that video, and I loved digging deep into social work in my master's classes. It was so interesting to me, but I found that in my master's classes, I learned more about the hard facts, read studies, saw the research that was going on that really felt like tangible tips and how-tos about being like good at social work and backing up why social work actually makes an impact and can actually matter. In my master's program, I wrote papers that were tough to write. I completed projects that were very, very time-consuming and tough. Like even in my communities class, I remember that we came up with this whole program plan about like basically launching a nonprofit to the point of like coming down to the budget and the goals and the outcomes and the studies that we were going to do, the evaluation. Like, it was a huge project and it was hard. I just hadn't really reached that point yet whenever I was in my bachelor's when I made that video. As a social worker too, you are constantly improving. Like the kind of tough academia doesn't necessarily end once you're done with school. Part of that being there are licensing exams to study for and pass. That can be tough. But also part of that being that as a social worker, you are a lifelong learner. There is honestly always going to be something that you could be getting better at to be a better social worker. I feel challenged in the brain every day at my job job. I use research skills that I learned when getting my master's. I use writing skills that I learned all throughout my time in school, but that were really developed in those academically tough MSW classes. But that does lead me to the kind of second point I was making when I made that previous video of social work is not an academically tough major to complete, but it is a tough major to complete. And I went on to talk about kind of the emotional toll that it can take on you, and that definitely doesn't change. I do think it feels a little bit different because when you are starting your degree in social work, that may be the first time that you are regularly exposed to some types of evil in this world. That's where social work programs can be so hard and challenging if you're willing to challenge yourself, in that it allows you a space to get out of the own bubble that you grew up in. And like everyone has some type of bubble, right? All of us have some social injustices that we're familiar with and some that maybe we didn't even know existed until we start to learn about them. Schools of social work, when done well, give students a safe place to like deconstruct some of the beliefs that they have, some of the internal beliefs that they have, biases that they have. And those aren't things that you can ignore and be a good social worker. You have to be aware of them, and you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable in your learning. So I said in that old video that it's a tough major to complete because it can be emotionally taxing, and that remains true if you're doing it well. If you complete a degree in social work and you are comfortable with your sense of identity and your beliefs in the world throughout the whole process, something went wrong, because there are so many things to learn about humans in this world and human experiences in this world that pushing yourself out of your bubble is where you can really learn and really grow. And that remains true when you're in the social work field as well. I think when I was getting my degree, I thought that I would just like academically learn the facts of different types of social injustices and different needs people have and all of this. And it really does become more of like an emotional sense of self process going on that continues whenever you're in your career. Kind of like how I said that you always will have something you can be working on to be a better social worker. Honestly, there's always something you can be working on in yourself to become a better social worker, which I'm not gonna lie to you, can be exhausting to be in the sense of like, oh, I can always be improving type of mindset. And I do think that that makes social work a bit different than other professions. There are definitely other professions that exists in as well, but something I wish I knew before going into the field of social work is that it shapes you like as an individual. Another point I made in that old video is that
burnout is not a problem that begins when you graduate. I found this for me personally, and also a lot of my friends that were also social work majors. Sometimes you don't realize how emotionally taxing the classes you're taking are. And if you aren't proactive with some self-care habits, or even just having a school life balance, making sure you have time where you're not thinking about school, then you can burn out as a student, and you don't want to enter the work field already burnt out on social work.
I would stand by this. I don't think I have too many different things to say on that specifically now being in the field of social work, but I guess what I wish I knew before entering my career as a social worker is that the emotional resiliency that you build during school really can lead you far as preventing burnout once you're in your career field. If you are pushing through and just barely making it to the finish line of your degree, it is going to be a struggle once you have your job and are in the career, because starting a job is not necessarily a breath of fresh, easy air. So that being said, when you're in school, being able to start to figure out like how you cope, what are good boundaries you can set, and starting to like practice those boundaries when you're in school can build that kind of foundation of emotional resiliency that you still have to work on when you're in the field to prevent burnout, but you already at least have that scaffolding to work within. So acknowledging that burnout is not something that begins at graduation, I think can set you up a little bit more for success when you're in the career of social work. I don't think it comes as a surprise to anybody that social workers are at risk for burnout. That is something that I knew before going into this field, and it's something that I think I'll talk more in depth about in other sit-down videos and have talked about more in depth on this channel too. So before becoming a social worker, I knew that social workers are at risk for burnout, but I wish that I knew how important that scaffolding of emotional resiliency that you can build during school is as you begin your career. Something that I had said in my bachelor's that I didn't know before I majored was that social work cohorts are a community.
Literally the way that schools of social work are typically set up is through cohorts, which means that you are taking the same classes with the same people for most of the years that you're in the school. So depending on your school size, it'll be maybe 20, maybe 40 people that are all going to be in your classes for however many semesters you're in the program. And so that being said, you get really close with people, you know who you can study with, you know people's backgrounds, you get deep in some classes.
What I wish I knew before becoming a social worker is that this really changes when you're no longer in school. And I think it can take people by surprise a whole lot. And I also think that it is something that social media can really help with. When you are in school, you are surrounded by people in the social work discipline. You have your professors, you have your field placement supervisor, you have other students who have like similar yet different passions to you, maybe have similar world world views as you. You're surrounded by a community of growing social workers, which is awesome and so special and does not remain the same once you begin your job. Now, different employers are better and worse at instilling a sense of community, whether it's through like group supervision or different things like that. But regardless, it's going to feel different whenever you're entering the field. Some people enter workplaces where they are the only social worker there, which is a really awesome opportunity, but as a feeling a sense of community level can be super isolating, especially with what we talked about earlier with people not necessarily understanding like what social work is and the value that you hold. So I do wish I knew before I became a social worker that it could feel so isolating, and it's something that I'm still kind of learning how to tackle best. There are a few organizations that are starting to pop up. One that comes to mind is Black Girls in Social Work that Badiqua Simon founded, and why it makes me think of her is because she talks about how she felt a lack of community after grad school and really felt like she was missing that sense of togetherness that she had when she was in grad school. So she founded the organization Black Girls in Social Work so that Black women who are social workers can interact with each other, get to know each other, lift each other up, share their knowledge. And that's an incredible organization that has made a difference in a lot of social workers' lives. Something else that comes to mind are just social workers who do have some sort of social media presence. Obviously, I encourage you to consume entertainment that has nothing to do with your professional life, but I also think that there is such value in finding people that relate to you and that understand what you spend 40 hours a week doing. So whether that's me, whether that's someone else that you feel like, okay, I feel like we're kind of on the same page here, and you can feel seen, understood, whatever it is. That's always my goal with me sharing my experience, is that it'll somehow provide community for people who maybe don't have too much social work community in their real day-to-day lives. Part of this is also just like going from being in school to being post-grad. So it's not unique to social work, but my experience is social work, so that's what I can speak on. But it is just so important to have people in your life who understand you without explanation, who you can feel safe with without putting on a front, that kind of thing. And even though social work should not be your whole identity, if it is something that you spend 40 hours a week doing, that obviously is a big part of your life. And it's important to have people either that you know virtually or that you know in person who understand that and understand the types of things you see in a day, the types of things you handle in a day, the types of fires you put out during a day, and like understand it on a personal level instead of you having to explain being a social worker to them too. You know what I mean? Social work friends are important friends to have. Also have other friends, but they are important friends to have. When I was a social work major, I said that I wish I knew that field placement would be the most important part of my education. I don't want to imply that you don't learn in the classes leading up to your field placement, because obviously you do. Every class you take is preparing you to be a social worker, but whenever you're in field placement, that is when you are actually frontline, hit the ground running, doing practice, interacting with clients, and like real ones. This is something I still stand by, and let me extrapolate, go a little further to say that before I became a social worker, I wish I knew how different doing the job would feel than social work school. Sometimes this is a critique that you may hear about schools in general, but also social work school, I hear it a lot about, in that the classes don't prepare you for actually being a social worker. There's probably a lot of nuanced discussion we could have here. I think the classes train you, and it really does take actually doing the job to understand what you're doing in a job. Part of the reason I think social work classes can feel so different than whenever you become a social worker is because each social work job is so different from each other. You can have 5 school social workers who all work, let's say like K through 2, but at 5 different school districts, and their days will look so much different from each other's because they're doing such different things. It's so hard to explain, I think, before you're in a job for social work, but it's not like, I don't know, like the service jobs I had before this. Whenever I was 16 and learning how to check at a grocery store, it's like once I learned how to do everything, I could do it. And sure, maybe something new would come along where like someone's using a WIC check and I would have to figure out how to like program in WIC to the computer, but then I could still do it. And I knew what my role was, I knew what my task was, my task stayed the same every day. Social work jobs, for the most part, are not like that. It is like I have a skill set of 175 different things that I can do. It is on me to introduce myself to each family that comes into the hospital, start like assessing needs as I'm talking to them and figuring out which of those 175 things may be useful to them, and if so, how I can actually like do that thing to make it be useful to them, whether it's a certain form, whether it's a resource, whether it's a referral, whether it's an application, whether it's education. Like there's so many different things that you can do for each client, and no client you have is going to be the same as another client you have. And that's just in my job. My job as a social worker is so different than like a friend of mine's who's a social worker, and it's so different from, you know, another friend. social work jobs are so different from each other. What school does is trains you to start in a way of thinking. It gives you reason for doing what you're doing. That's what those policy classes are, the history of social welfare classes, any special topics classes you may take on like a certain population. They're giving you a reason for doing why you're doing, which is like the bottom level foundation. And then with projects and with discussions you have, a lot of it is training your brain to think creatively, to be a problem solver, to use advocacy, to not take no for an answer, like to see people without bias. Having discussions in class that train your brain to work in these ways are not going to feel like whenever you're in your social work job and your brain is actually working in these ways. In the previous video, I compared it to like soccer practice versus a soccer game, and I would say that it's not even that similar to each other. I'm trying to think of even like a good metaphor that I can use. I feel like it's if a runner is doing stretches. That's what class is. It's like we're using our runner body to stretch because it's going to be good for us, but then actually going into a social work job is like actually running the marathon. It is not the same movements. It was so helpful to train your body and to stretch it out and to make the muscles work well, but it is such different technique than the actually running is. So what I wish I knew before I became a social worker is that learning does not stop when you graduate. Learning just begins when you graduate, and each new job that you take will have such a learning curve. Okay, what am I actually doing at this job? Now I'm kind of becoming self-sufficient. What are like all the different resources or things I can offer at this job? And then, okay, how do I actually become better at this job? Now that I'm comfortable with what I'm doing, how do I become better? And then things are constantly changing. Policies are changing. You are not done learning once you graduate. That being said, since this whole thing was about field placement is the most important part of your education, I think that field placement is the bridge that kind of bridges the gap between classes and your job. Field placement is going to feel different than your job. In a good field placement location, it'll be a safe place to learn and to try and to self-reflect and to ask questions. Now, I'm not going to lie and pretend that everyone's field placement location is that perfect learning environment field placement location, but field placement provides a space where you start taking those skills that you learn in class and start applying them to the real world, because there definitely is a gap between classes and between actually being a social worker in a social work job. That would be something interesting to ask social workers around you. Like, what did it feel like whenever you graduated and started your first job as far as the learning curve goes? Like, how long did it take you to feel like you were competent at what you're doing? One of the last things from the previous video that I'll talk about before I add in a few more things is that I had said, I wish I knew how necessary it was to celebrate the small wins.
And this goes for classes, but it was something that I really learned during field placement. Social workers can do a lot, but obviously injustice and brokenness in this world are just so big that you can't fully fix it. And lots of times you'll find that systems fail, and systems fail you, and systems fail people.
That becomes so much more necessary, like exponentially, when you're actually working in the field of social work. And this is something that I plan to make an upcoming video talking about tips for your first job as a social worker, that I think will touch on this maybe a little bit deeper. But what I wish I knew before I became a social worker is that just wanting to help people will not carry you through your career. You will not always see the fruits of your labor. It actually might be very rare that you see the fruits of your labor. As a helping profession, with people coming in wanting to be helping people to whatever degree that is and whatever population that is, I think a lot of social workers want to be able to fix problems in their clients' lives. And to an extent, we can help do that. There's a lot of nuance there, but it can be very discouraging whenever you're in a career in social work and you can't fix everything. Sometimes you can't help everything. Sometimes you can hardly help anything, whether that's due to limited resources, limited bandwidth, high caseload, whatever it may be, strict policy. There's a high chance that you will not be doing everything that you wish you could be doing, and that can be discouraging. And so not only is it important to celebrate small wins when they do come, I would say we almost even need a mindset shift that I did not know that I would need to have, in that my day is successful if I made someone's awful experience just the littlest bit better. Like, maybe it still is an awful experience, awful time of life, but if I can just make it just be that wee little bit better, that's a win. There are so many things that I run into in a day that I wish I could fix. I wish I could help. I wish I could solve the problem. I wish I could just remove the pain from the client that I'm talking with, and just realistically, I can't. And that can be so discouraging. So instead of at the end of the day relying on, I fixed this problem fully and completely and it'll never come back, I really have to rely on, I did everything I could. And I've had to teach myself, and I'm still a work in progress at being okay with, I did everything that I could. And I have to say that in a like genuine sense of, when I'm working, I need to be doing everything that I realistically can for a client. And then at the end of the day, I have to be okay with knowing that I did do everything that I could, and that has to be okay. I hope hearing that mindset shift isn't discouraging to you, but I think we we can cannon out of graduation with this great passion and this great, I'm gonna do all of this, I'm gonna save the world, I'm gonna change this, and that is so awesome. But I think it's important to remember that you can't be the great person at every point of problem in this world. We need to have great social workers in each little cog of the wheel. Is that the thing? Cog of each little cog needs to be a great social worker. And if you are that cog, you are doing that cog's job and you are doing that little cog's job well, but you cannot be every part of the contraption. Do you get what I'm saying? Being passionate people who see the change that needs to be made in the world, we can want to do it all. But what is most important is doing every single thing you can to be great, specifically in the role that you have. And that has to be okay in order for you to be okay. It can be so tiring so quick to feel like you're not doing enough and to feel the weight of huge, ginormous social problems entirely on your shoulders. This is something I've learned like in my year and some change that I've worked so far. It has to be okay for you to do everything you can, and that's it. I did not know that before becoming a social worker. I thought that I was going to be the change that I wanted to see in this world. And really, I can be part of the change that I want to see in this world. I am one individual, but that is a good thing because I can be my part of the change really well, and I can cheer on people who are being other parts of the change as they're doing their job really well. As a whole, we gotta work together if we're gonna make big social change, but I cannot do it by myself. Two more, because I bet this is gonna be a very long video. The second to last one that I did not know before I became a social worker is that people will be all up in your business about your income and about your opportunity and about your decision to be a social worker. I'm gonna try not to like fly off the rails with this one. People are so concerned about social workers' income. Social workers honestly are so concerned about other social workers' income. It is valid to wonder like what the income opportunity is in a field that you are pursuing. It is so much less valid to go to people who are social workers and tell them how they're never gonna make any money, there's no opportunity, why did you wanna be that? Like speaking negativity to someone's decision. I did not know how many people would take it as like a personal affront, a personal offense that I am a social worker. I've had people tell me to my face like, oh, you're never gonna make money in that job. You'd be like, why does that matter to you? Like, what does that matter to you? And I'm making fine money. I get so tired of hearing about social workers' income. It is like just with any other job that it depends on where you work, it depends on geographically where you are, it depends on the amount of education and experience that you have. It is so possible to make a living in social work jobs with social work degrees. That being said, there are definitely areas of the field that underpay social workers to where maybe it's not even a living wage. This is something that you have to balance within yourself of, do I want to be somewhere that has a more stable income that maybe I feel a little less passionate about until I get to a place where maybe I could go somewhere that doesn't pay as high. It is up to you to decide where you would like to work in the field. There are job positions that do not pay social workers well. There are also job positions that do pay social workers well. And the same goes for different agencies. There are agencies that do not pay social workers well, and there are agencies that do pay social workers well. If income is something you were concerned about, there will be opportunity to make money as a social worker. Now, will you become a millionaire? No, probably not. If income is the single one most important thing to you, be a finance bro. Do something, something that will make you be more in it for the money. For me personally, I wanted a nice little balance of doing something that I feel good at, doing something that I feel like has a sense of meaning and purpose in this world, and doing something that allows me to financially live. I'm doing just fine right now. And I'm not too interested in like adding to the dialogue about social workers won't make any money or defending myself to people who do think that, because frankly, it's not their business. Like I said, I'm gonna try not to fly off the rails. Income is just one of the things. There are people who think that social workers get paid too much because they don't know the value of social workers. I have been told to my face that my starting salary is too high for being a social worker, whenever there are like other disciplines that deserve to get paid more than me. What do I say? Okay, sorry. Having a bachelor's in social work coming straight out of school with no experience, you are going to get paid less than someone with their clinical license with 10 years of experience with it. I just did not know how many people cared so much about people's decisions to become social workers. I've had things commented on like, oh, enjoy being able to smile while you can because this profession will eat you alive. Okay, and if it does, that's my business. Whenever I chose to get my master's in social work, I had current master's students telling me I was making the worst decision of my life. This kind of stuff may be present in lots of professions. I just did not know as a social worker how many strong personal opinions other people have on social workers that they are willing to throw at me because of the degrees that I have. Just something I didn't know. I don't have wisdom to speak on it. It just was not something that I was prepared for. And to be clear, some of this has come from putting my life on social media. Some of this does not. Some of this is just like in the professional world that I am in. Anyways, the last little point that I want to make of something that I wish I knew before becoming a social worker is that not having social work be your whole world does not make you a bad social worker. Let me say it again for the people in the back. Not having social work be your whole world does not make you a bad social worker. I think part of this can come from the fact that social workers as a whole are pretty passionate people who want to make a change and want to make difference and also see some really dirty parts of this world. And with that, we still have to live lives that we enjoy. We still have to have fun. We have to connect with people and love people in a personal sense, not just a professional sense. Sacrificing yourself to the profession of social work does not make you a better social worker than having boundaries, doing what you can do in a day, and then living your life outside of work, not social work related. That does not make you a bad social worker to leave work at work. That can be hard to do because we do feel so passionate and involved with the work that we do, but it does not make you a bad social worker to set boundaries and to keep those boundaries. This is also something that I plan to touch on a little bit deeper in the tips for your first social work job. I feel like no matter what area of the field you are in, you will probably see people that sacrifice their lives for their job. That's probably true no matter what area of work you are in as a whole, no matter what discipline you are in. You will see people sacrifice their lives for their jobs. It is not worth it, and it does not make you a bad social worker to not want to sacrifice yourself for your job. It'll actually make you a social worker that can last longer, not burn out. You are so much more important than your work, and that is true even if you are in a helping profession. I think people think because I'm a social worker, because I'm in a helping profession, I have to give all of myself that I can to the people that I'm working with. Most like you have to martyr yourself to where you're working. It does not make you a bad social worker to treat social work like a job. Social work is a job. You can treat it like a job, and that's okay. And you can be a really good social worker and not have it be your whole life. Crazy, I know. I didn't know that. I didn't know that before I was a social worker. I think because we become so passionate and so involved, I was under this premonition that I would just do anything to help the clients that I work with. And while that partly is true, when I am on the clock, I will be a great social worker, but I am not willing to sacrifice myself for the profession. That's what the fact of the matter is. I hope this video, I don't know, provided wisdom, nuance, discussion. It really is just one that I see so many people watch the What I Wish I Knew Before I Majored in Social Work video every single day. People to this day, it's probably 150 views a day that video gets. And as a person, I have learned and I have grown and I have experienced so much more now than when I made that video. So I mean, most of the things I still hold true to, but it also has more discussion around them now. And as we know, a couple of the things I changed a little bit too. These little social work videos are so fun for me to sit down and do because it is something that I enjoy talking about. Obviously, I have my complaints sometimes. My complaints may be different than your complaint. My thoughts may be different than your thoughts. That's fine. But I like having this area where we can discuss and we can talk about it and where maybe at least a couple social workers feel seen or feel like they learn a little something. So thank you for watching this video. I appreciate you so much. And thank you again to MSW Helper for sponsoring this video. Make sure to check them out. If you are applying for MSW or if you know anybody who is, MSW Helper is such a good resource. I'll see you next time.